as the provider of data for AI services, you don't always know what the end use is going to be for your customer.
Washington, D.C. had the highest concentration of translation interpreting jobs. So that's 1.23 per 1,000 jobs.
We don't grow in terms of an M&A path. That's not our gig. We grow by the quality of our service and the quality of the relationships.
And welcome to SlatorPod 72. Hello.
Hi, Florian.
How's it going over there in London?
Pretty good, yeah. Things are on the up.
Things are on the up. That's what they are here as well. Today, we're not heading up. We're heading west to Ireland. So we're going to talk to Thomas Murray, the CEO of Vistatec. And Vistatec, obviously, a lot of people know them. They're one of the leading providers of enterprise localization. We'll discuss kind of how this business evolved from the big software launches of the, I don't know, what do you call this? The naughties, the OEs?
Yeah, the naughties.
The naughties, okay.
I think that's an accepted term.
Great to, now obviously a lot more agile and all of that. So, yeah, last week we had SlatorCon remote. Fantastic. On Thursday, 4 hours, probably even more than 4 hours. And yeah, we had, I think, over 300 people attending. There was a lot of interaction. I was going to look up the stats, but I think it facilitated like 200 to 300 networking sessions, like these individual networking sessions, which are pretty cool. I actually met someone that I'm going to follow up on a particular project. So
very nice.
It's cool. It's the, you did it too, right? It's basically that kind of random chat
the speed networking.
The speed networking.
Yeah.
And it's getting a little better. I think there's, it's getting better in terms of, I think we could actually manipulate it on the back end. We could say, well, these groups can only network with these groups, but we, you can really, I mean, if Hopman's kind of built for 10,000 people plus, etc. So you can kind of tweak this, but for our purposes, we didn't. We just let the algorithm determine.
Well, and you can also request to speak to somebody directly. I hadn't realized that, but yeah, you can also do that.
Well, you may have not realized it, or it just wasn't a function. I mean, they keep adding a lot of new stuff. And then we had the booths, which were, I think we had 7 or 8 booths, which people could stop by, and people did stop by. That was interesting. And then there was the Lilt session in between, which was also cool. We had about 80 people on that session. That was in the break. So, someone won the AirPods. Right?
Yeah, I know the person that won them. I don't know if it was I don't know if it was just one set of AirPods that they were giving away, maybe. But in any case, I know somebody who won the Lilt AirPods who was very, very happy about it. So
there you go.
Yes.
You need AirPods, Esther.
I know. I know.
Although mine are actually broken. They don't have the. I mean, they work, but they don't have the, the noise cancellation thing. If I activate it, there's kind of a weird static sound. So I don't have the noise cancellation anymore. But because I never travel, I don't really use the noise cancellation anymore.
Well, I don't travel either, but I definitely need the noise cancellation being in central London. True.
No, I don't need it here. Well, I mean, they keep building out there. They keep ripping up the tram tracks and so on. So it's pretty noisy. That's why we're recording this over lunchtime, so it's a little less noisy. The workers are having lunch. Cool. So just quick key takeaways. What was your key takeaway? Let's start with Ayuno.
Yeah. Well, from SlatorCon remote, we had David Lee, the CEO of Ayuno. I mean, it was a great message of growth really within that industry, sort of longer term trends, sectoral trends towards growth with over the top streaming services. He gave some stats as well, talking about more than 200 million new SVOD, subscription video on demand accounts being created in 2020. Sounds like a lot. And more than 500 million net global video on demand subscribers now around the world. Huge. He was talking a little bit about scale and speed, the necessity for both of those elements in this new streaming reality. Yeah, so I liked it. Yeah.
Yeah, there was a question from the audience around, is the production restarting? And he said, look, it's the demand. I think he says yes, it's restarting, but also, I mean, the demand for the back catalog is still there because all these new players, the Apples and what have you, are aggressively pushing in, and there's just so much more to localize from back catalog.
Yeah, exactly. Why wouldn't you if you've got a whole back catalog of great content that you can access?
I think Disney isn't done yet. It's so random. Certain good Disney like cartoons, like the longer, the 2 hour, whatever, 1.5 hour kid cartoons, like some of them are, for some random reason, they only show in Italian and English for me. So
okay.
For my kids, I'm like, well, should we watch it in Italian or English? And then like they don't like, obviously they want to watch it in German, but then, neither. But then the thing is, we switch to English, which is, obviously a little closer than Italian. And then, but then the background, some of the, not subtitles, but actually some of the text inside the movie is localized into Italian.
Oh, I see.
Like some of the writing, like, so this like emergency in Italian, or like, click here would be in Italian. And it's actually, it looks quite well done. I should have asked at some point, like,
but hang on, aren't you saying they're mixing languages though? When you saying
they are, yes.
Okay,
so
that's not great.
Well, that's not great. So, well, generally that's where Disney probably needs to work a little bit more on, because I'm sure they have other versions other than Italian and English. So it's a little random that I only get to choose Italian and English. Anyway, rambling. Moving on. Yeah. Data for AI.
Yeah, Data for AI. That was a really great panel session that Anna moderated. We had Casper Grathwell, who we've also had on the podcast, from the president of Oxford Languages Division at Oxford University Press. We also had Cara Lindell, the CEO of Veninger Global, and Michelle Lopez, the founder and CEO of E2F. So, there are a few things I think that stood out for me in this. One was sort of comparing the similarities and differences of servicing data for AI customers versus traditional language services customers. One big thing that came out was recruitment and the difference in sourcing requirements, really. So with an LSP, they were saying, with your linguists, with your translators, you want to build this longer term, almost partnership style relationship. You have linguists that are working on the same customer accounts again and again and again for years sometimes, whereas data for AI projects tend to be way more ad hoc, very project based. So I think Michelle was saying, once you've built your data sets, you may never contact those same people ever again. So it's kind of one-off, move on to the next thing. And I think a wider point as well was generally that as the provider of data for AI services, you don't always know what the end use is going to be for your customer, because it might be really sensitive. It's a very fast-moving, potential confidentiality issues and all sorts happening around that space. So I think Casper was saying, well, it can be quite challenging to see what the big picture is and what your client is actually trying to achieve with the project that they've asked you to complete, and that their needs might change throughout the duration of the project. Interesting.
Yeah. It's basically a giant recruitment exercise, it seems often, right? And project based. I think that's what also some of the Appen investors maybe found out, that this isn't, that it's still a service business, because we spoke about the story with Appen, the stock tanked, etc. So it's very much a recruiting business, which obviously is good for LSPs because they know how to recruit. E-commerce, we had an e-commerce panel with not Spotify, but Shopify. And Blend and Wix. So
So I was moderating this one, and we had Liat from Wix, who was their head of e-commerce marketing. We had Julia Greco from Shopify, who's the localization programs lead for one of their 3 localization teams, and we had Yair Tal from Blend. It was good. Again, sort of a rosy picture of e-commerce, and we delved into some of the opportunities and some of the challenges that 2020 brought to the sector. Everybody was saying, okay, it was a transformative year for e-commerce. You had, on the one hand, consumers' expectations were shifting with the move to online, and nobody being allowed out. And then also you had these new realities and some new opportunities for merchants. So we spoke quite a bit about the opportunities of cross-border trade and how localization facilitates that. So growth all round, both at Shopify and Wix and the merchants and businesses that they facilitate. So I think Liat from Wix was telling us that they had something like 63% more stores had shoppers coming from multiple countries in 2020. And Julia gave us a bit of a story about how they were helping, how Shopify was helping some of their stores as well to pivot online. For example, providing gift vouchers, and they were fast tracking some of these initiatives that they'd already started, but to help people during the pandemic. And Julia also was talking about, the decentralized model that they run at Shopify, talking about some of the differences between her team, which is marketing growth, and compared to the product team that does the back end, and also the support team from the localization perspective. It
was good. It was good. Yeah, good takeaway. So let me just go through a couple others. Corn Ferry, and just briefly, because I want to talk about some of the other stories we picked up this week. But so Corn Ferry, Valérie Petit gave a presentation on transitioning from print to digital. So she works Corn Ferry is kind of a management consultant, HR management firm, right? And they have a lot of these also the testing content. So we spoke a bit about the challenges for translating some of the testing material, which just from a language point of view are really difficult to do. And she, gave an example from, we're some Russian staff internally, we're just debating the translation of certain terms for a long time. So it just kind of highlights sometimes it's not only about text, often always, of course, it's around just the difficulty of getting the actual translation right, no matter what technology you have. And then we had ADP, Marianne Henselman, and that was really nice. I liked that she had only basically one slide, but just it was a journey, right? And one slide started in, when did it start? In 2008, took over a very nascent kind of internal localization department all the way to 2021 now and beyond, and how they kind of deliberately build up that internal localization and translation capability. ADP is huge. I think they process I don't know, she mentioned a number, I forgot, but a big chunk of global payroll.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And they have 800,000 clients, $14 billion revenue. So there's a lot of obviously translation localization going. And then she mentioned one thing that I remember was that she got internal competition on MT. So they were working around and doing some MT, but then there was somebody internally somewhere in Europe that started basically developing a proprietary NMT engine. And then some of the senior managers were coming, hey, what's going on here? Can you do this as well? And then so there was internal competition not from the lock function, but basically from outside. And then they more aggressively pursued NMT, and now they're actually reporting to the CTO. So it was an interesting story there. Talking about tech, we had Dell's Wayne Borland, Director of Translation. He spoke to We Localize, Daring Gobble, VP of Solutions, kind of working around, just using data for localization and calculating ROI, and just also how hard it is to get sometimes the data from, I don't know what you call it, but the field, the non-localization functions, and to really get that right for automation, etc. Hard to summarize. Sorry, I butchered this a little bit in just
it was
a
really
words,
great one. This I think was one of my favorite sessions.
Yeah.
Sessions actually, the two of them sort of talking together about their partnership and their solutions.
That's what the feedback I also got from a couple of people. They were like, "Hey, I really like the conversational format." So we had some presentations, but we also had some conversational. It's not even presentation; it was just conversations. So I think that lightens it up because it is hard to sit in front of your screen for 4.5 hours. So you wanna break it up a little bit. Okay, hard turn to the UK and $500 million in contracts for healthcare. But that's not all of it is for the NHS, right? It's not only NHS, but they're both healthcare. So one
it's across 2 different tenders, and it was, I mean, in theory, more than $500 million US, but these are framework contracts, so it tends to be more of a ceiling than an actual guaranteed value. But yeah, this was two different tenders in the UK for the public sector translation and interpreting services that were awarded pretty recently. One was for Healthcare Trust Europe. I don't know about Europe, but given that we're in the UK, but sure. Okay, thanks, Healthcare Trust Europe.
You're Europe.
Yeah, I mean,
the UK isn't Europe. I like when the UK says it's the UK and then Europe.
Well, people keep excluding us from data points, like the UK excluding Europe. So, it's hard to sort of picture it. But anyway, the point is there were some awards from a body called Healthcare Trust Europe, and I should not have brought up the Europe question. Then
we can talk Europe all day. We can talk Europe. We're not part of Europe. We're in the middle. Yeah, we're not part of it. Sorry, go ahead.
We digress. So, yeah, this Healthcare Trust Europe, let's call it HTE, was allocated £250 million to several different LSPs. And then there was also a separate tender from the NHS, Shared Business Services, that allocated 125 million GBP to also lots of different people.
Vendors. So, what was the duration again?
And it's like 3 years, some of them.
3 years, all right.
Yeah.
So I remember when we got started with Slator in 2015, 2016, and we first came across these contracts, my mind was blown away. What? You're talking about 100 million pounds, and now I've gotten used to it, and the contracts are getting bigger and bigger. But I think it's just that the UK is one of the very few countries globally that aggregates all of this nationwide.
Yeah.
That's why the numbers are so big.
I mean, they do also have some, I think, regional procurement, and particularly when it comes to interpreting. There was the Eastern Shires one, and there's a few. There are still regional ones, but you're right that I think compared certainly to some of the other European countries, we're certainly more centralized.
Oh, much more. I mean, there's no. I mean, in Switzerland, there's no federal centralization of, and then Switzerland's obviously 10 times smaller in terms of population, or maybe 8 times.
Well, we're a relatively small country geographically, so maybe that has something to do with it as well.
Well, I think the British central government is quite efficient and centralized. I mean, that what we've seen with the. Trust me.
It's all relative, I guess. Yeah.
When I'm using the government websites and all of that,
the websites are really good. Yeah, UK government websites, really good. Digital. They're pretty hot. They're pretty. Yeah, I think forward thinking, quite advanced when it comes to digital.
Yes.
So, yeah, but
when you surf our federal government's website, there's still PDFs and okay, yeah. How much what do you think is the average wage? The median annual pay for somebody employed in the translation localization industry in the US annually, not translators and interpreters, but actually somebody employed in the industry in the US. What do you think?
I kind of remember the figure from last year. It was around sort of 50,000 or something.
That's right, $52,330 as of May 2020. It's up slightly from 51,830 in 2019, and this data is coming from the Bureau of Labor Statistics Annual Occupational Outlook Handbook. Tracks employment wage estimates for over 800 occupations. Was released on March 31st. We covered it now. Actually, the category translation interpretation covers 77,000 employees in the U.S., not freelancers and independent contractors. So this is not counting freelance linguists. But it also includes more than just linguists, right? It's people employed in this industry. So anybody who works for, probably TransPerfect, Lionbridge would be included there if they're working in the U.S.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's not just for translators and interpreters. Now, in terms of the top paying states, it was Virginia, New Jersey, Maryland, New York, and California, somewhere between $70,000 and almost $80,000 a year median. And then Washington, D.C. had the highest concentration of translation interpreting jobs. So hang on, that's 1.23 per 1,000 jobs. So that's like 1 in every 1,000 would be in that industry. That's fascinating.
12 in every 10,000. Yeah.
I mean,
we don't know how many jobs there were. Well, how many jobs?
No, but it's because of all the government contractors, right? So it's probably all of the defense contractors are based there, and so close to the center of power. So that would be my speculation. And generally, they're very optimistic. They also like we are, right? We just posted business is booming as our rep for SlatorCon Remote, but the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics says they're expecting a 20% increase in jobs by 2029. So about 15,000 additional jobs in this industry. Again, that's not counting freelancers. So bullishness all around. And they say job prospects should be best for those who have professional certification. Now you tell me what the professional certification is, but maybe an ATA certificate would help. Cool. All right. Well, that's it for now. Let's head over and talk to Thomas Murray of Vistatec.
Sounds good.
And welcome back to SlatorPod. Today with Thomas Murray, the CEO of Vistatec. Hi, Thomas.
Hi, Florian. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Not too bad at all. Not too bad at all. Glad to be here.
Great. Thanks so much for taking the time. Thomas, where does this podcast find you today? What city, what country?
Well, I'm at home here in Dublin, COVID bound, I think, like most people at this stage, and hopefully looking forward to some relief in the next few months with a bit of luck.
Yeah. Absolutely. So in Ireland, how are things going? Are you
improving
slowly opening up, or
improving slowly? The vaccine rollout has really started to accelerate here, and that's really starting to have an impact. We would be hopeful to be close enough to normality, possibly by July, August, but international travel is probably a ways off for us yet, I would have thought. But in terms of day-to-day living, we would hope to be getting back to some level of normality by the end of July, which would be great.
Nice.
We've had a long lockdown here, pretty much on and off since March of last year, really.
I can relate. I can relate in London.
Yes. Well, you guys are nearly out, I believe, which must be great. Yeah.
Well, yeah. So we're Esther and I were talking offline a couple of days ago about maybe doing something in Zurich towards the end of the year in terms of conferencing. So let's see. I mentioned a couple of times I don't want to be blazing the trail in terms of in-person conference, but I am missing the in-person element here.
I think so. I think everybody is missing, an element of human contact in their lives. Certainly those of us that had, a high level of contact, perhaps in office-based scenarios. Yeah, it is. It's a very different setup for us. But that being said, I still think, we need to be careful and, adhere to the public health guidelines and, keep each other safe. So, for the moment, I think we'll be taking a very long view in terms of travel. Particularly business travel. I just don't feel comfortable that I would want to put any of my people, our customers, at risk for the foreseeable. I think we're just going to have to take a long, hard look at it before we start changing our views on that.
Makes sense. So, Thomas, tell us a bit more about your personal background, career, and what made you land in the language industry. Has that been something for your whole career life, or is this more of a... Usually people get into this by kind of happenstance, coincidence.
That's certainly true for myself. My background would be finance, and I had been working in London and in Australia when I was just after I'd finished university, and a friend of mine mentioned an opportunity in a localization company. This is going back many, many years, and I went out to have a look, and it just seemed like a really exciting place to work. The place was full of like-minded people. It was, a hive of activity and excitement, and there was just a buzz about it, and it was really a great place to work. And the people were amazing. And that started whenever over 20, 25 years ago now, and it hasn't changed for me. So I suppose it probably was happenstance, but it was the people and the environment that attracted me to it. And no regrets, absolutely no regrets since. And so that was in
That's
Dublin.
interesting.
And then we moved on from there. I spent a little bit of time in Asia, and then came back to Vistatec. So, and no plans to leave the industry at the moment anyway.
Great. Yeah, I have very few people have had regrets about joining the industry. So from the many people I've spoken to so far. So
well, it's certainly an exciting place to be. There's no doubt about that.
It is. Absolutely. So you mentioned Vistatec. Of course, you're the CEO. Give us Vistatec in a nutshell. Presence, size, staff, specializations.
Well, I suppose Vistatec is how would you describe Vistatec? Well, for me, Vistatec is a passion, okay, as an organization. And I would say this, I believe it's staffed by some of the best people in the industry. It's a great place to work. That for me is absolutely critical. I feel very strongly that people need to be coming to work, looking forward to it and enjoying it, because if you don't, it's just not worth it. So that is really important to me. Vistatec as an organization and as a business, this industry started, I suppose, in a very conventional sense of translation, but over time, certainly we have transitioned to a point where I would say, conventional or orthodox translation is probably at this point less than a third of our business. And we would now very much see ourselves as in a position of providing, global content solutions for organizations that, play on a global stage. And that can cover, anything, from text to voice to video, like you name it. I think it's one of the interesting things about our industry is how many times it reinvents itself and surprises you. Back in the day, I remember, it was all doc and content came from software publishers, and that's just the way it was. Whereas now, the number of ways you can consume content, and that's before we even consider, the volumes of content out there is astronomical. So we would see, ourselves as providing, global content solutions to anybody that wants to play in a global stage. And, it's critical, for the global players to maintain that global presence. And that's what we're there. That's what we're there to facilitate and help.
And what's it like servicing?
That's us in a nutshell.
As a nutshell, yeah. I was going to say, what's it like servicing this global stage from Dublin, Ireland? I mean, can you tell us a bit about what business life is like in Dublin with tech businesses?
Well, certainly Dublin has had a reputation for being quite a hotbed of technology, and it has certainly attracted, all of the major names to Dublin, and that has kind of led to quite a kind of a hothouse environment here in Dublin with all of the various tech companies, which is great. But for us, the location, was really born, I suppose, of the founders of the company. They were all Irish and were based here in Dublin, and that's where we've remained. But as a business, we'd have, locations and resources basically all over the world, wherever the clients or the services demand. But, from a personal point of view, I suppose, how do I see it? Well, for me, it's very easy. I just kind of basically set the tone and the tenor for the business, hire the right people, and then make sure I stay out of the way and let them, do what their expertise has trained them to do. So, being based here in Dublin has, really, it's more happenstance. It has no particular impact on the business. We have operations and people, wherever we need them. It does remain the case that, a large majority of, the tech clients which we would perhaps deal with are based out of the US, but less so. We would have more and more European and Asian based clients. So, from that point of view, wherever we're based really doesn't matter a whole lot. And certainly, the shift, the paradigm shift that COVID has brought around, has certainly been made very clear to all of us that, geos are from our side of the fence really not that important.
Yeah.
In terms of running
it's interesting you say that. I mean, and you brought up Mountain View there. So you've got, I think, a fairly large offices in Mountain View. And is that sort of
Yep.
Does that facilitate 24-hour service, etc.? How do you collaborate with them?
Yep. Well, we have to have people basically follow the sun at this stage. If we're not in a position to provide 24/7, 365, well then, you're not in a position to help your clients achieve their goals. Ultimately your clients' goals, are what you're there to help achieve. and they are driven by consumers, and consumers' demands are very, very, very strong, and in some cases quite fickle. So if you don't satisfy those demands, and your consumers will move. So we have to be in a position to service that. So be it Argentina, Mountain View, God knows where, we have to be in a position to deal with that. That's the nature of the game, really. The turnaround times and. Pardon?
Go ahead, sir.
I was just saying, that the turnaround times that projects now demand are so tight, that any kind of distance between you and your customer or you and your supply chain, is critical. So having that geo spread is critical. It's vital, really, for us.
Got it. So maybe let's take a bit of a macro view here. So you've been in the industry for quite some time as well. And what changes have you seen generally, like in the translation localization? What would be like the top 3 things over the past 1 or 2 decades, right?
The volume has got to be top of the list. The sheer volume of content, that is out there is the biggest one. Like nobody would ever have forecasted, and the industry is full of people who thought they were going to be able to, but it just exceeds expectations every time. People thought that MT would eat our lunch and that'd be the end, but it's hard to imagine. But actually, the growth of content has actually outstripped the pace at which MT can deal with it. So for me, content would the growth or the content explosion would certainly be in the top 3. I think perhaps. From my perspective or on my generation's perspective, the way in which data or content is consumed and has changed utterly. It was largely the province of business and big large tech manuals and all that kind of stuff. That's all gone now. Now it's the consumer that drives it. The content is created by people walking down the street outside my office here on handheld devices, things that people thought were science fiction 20 years ago. So that'll probably be another massive change for us. And also I think how important content actually is and how content can change things and drive things and impact people all over the world in ways that we would never have envisaged. I think that's probably another aspect that has really kind of hit me over the years in terms of globalization. The one that always kind of makes me think is Uber. Uber was thought up, I believe, here in Dublin, or the idea was originally arrived at here in Dublin at one of the tech conferences, and that was just an idea. And Uber has completely transformed an industry, like globally. And that to me, is quite amazing. So I suppose, the growth in content and its ability to change things and the way it's consumed, really are the things that really strike me, if you're asking me, over the last 10, 20 years.
So you mentioned Uber there. So technology, Vistatec is also known for being very strong in the kind of enterprise tech localization space. So what's your approach to managing this balance kind of between diversifying for growth, but also specializing in a particular niche? Like what's the overall strategy of Vistatec in this space?
Well, I think, diversification, when somebody says diversification to me, I always think, that's a way of reducing your risk, and that's certainly one way of looking at the technology point of view. Our view on technology is we don't develop it ourselves. We won't. It's not what we would consider part of our strategy. What we will do, we don't build, we will buy. We will look at any particular problem that may require a technical solution, and then we will try and figure out what's the best solution to that. We won't necessarily have a prepackaged solution that we've developed ourselves. So our attitude to technology is very agnostic. We will buy our competitors' technology, no problem. If it's the best solution for the customer, I don't mind. What we will do, though, or what we do try and do, and have done very successfully, is we will try and knit, or bring together various pieces of technology. So our attitude to technology is look at the problem first. See what's the best way to solve it and what's the best piece of technology or kit to address that challenge, and then go with that. We wouldn't necessarily have a particular view on, this is the right piece of technology and we're going to try and sell it. We don't work that way. As I said, we would see it being very much look at the problem first and what it is that you're trying to achieve and what's the best fit in terms of a solution thereafter. So, that would be quite a very strongly held view within Vistatec. We won't be reinventing the wheel.
Maybe.
I don't know if that answers your question. No.
Yeah. I think maybe as an adjacent question, I noticed that Vistatec, I think, it holds the ISO certification for post-editing of machine translation, I think. And I mean, I was a bit intrigued because I think relatively few, comparative to how many LSPs are out there at the moment, relatively few have actually adopted that ISO standard quite yet. So, I mean, I just wanted to ask, what business benefits do you see in these kind of standards? Do you have a particular strategy for ISO? Obtaining things like medical devices, post-editing, what do you see as the value that it adds?
Well, the med devices side of things is kind of a case and are slightly different in that, if you want to play in that space, you've got to comply, with the regulatory requirements that are there. And, ISO would in some cases, whether it's regulatorily required or not, the customers would insist on it. Look, ISO, regardless of what context you're looking at it in, to me is part of an approach to operational excellence, right? And it brings a level of discipline, to your operational execution. And we look at ISO and the various standards in not necessarily, it's something that it's good to have because, it helps with RFPs and that. That's kind of one way of looking at it, but I think it's quite a narrow view and you don't really get a lot out of it. We're actually looking for something from ISO, from all of the standards. We want to come away with something positive from them, not a kind of tick the box, we can do this, because, there are lots of industry experts out there. They know probably an awful lot more than we do. So it's in our interest to engage with them. So I would look at all those things, not necessarily, as I say, from the point of view of tick box, we've got these, but what can we learn from them? And then what in some cases, what can we say? No, that doesn't work for us. So the certifications themselves, there is requirements for them, and that's helpful. But the process and the discipline of adhering to them, does bring a lot of benefits to an organization, and particularly in scalable organizations like us.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think a question that a lot of LSPs have. A follow-on question then regarding machine translation. I think you have a partnership with Adapt Center, which is pretty local to where you are. What does that involve exactly?
Yeah. Well, that basically involves, the tech team here in Dublin cooperating with them on various projects. We would have our CTO, Phil Ritchie, would have a very strong reputation within the industry and has been involved in various standard setting processes, both at European level and at a local level. So I suppose it's more about trying to craft or bring our views, in terms of where we'd like to see things going. And our experience and the experience that we've gained from our customers with those various organizations. But again, our approach to MT isn't necessarily limited to one particular flavor or not. I'd say we've probably got most flavors available within Vistatec. It very much depends on, the outcomes that the clients are trying to achieve.
Yeah. I mean, and thinking then about some of these requirements and what customers are trying to achieve. I mean, we've heard a lot about clients in technology and software thinking about things or wanting to achieve agile translation, localization, and get rid of things like minimum fees. I mean, when you're thinking about these clients in technology and in software, what do you think are their main pain points right now?
Look, I think one of the biggest challenges, at the moment is that concept of agility and speed of execution. We work in an industry, that never sleeps, that has extraordinarily demanding consumers at the end of the chain, who are, as I've said, to some extent fickle. So, if you don't execute, so the idea of being able to service very quickly with a high quality product, and to be switched on and off, literally, in the blink of an eye, is critical, and that's where we come in. That's the expertise and the experience that we bring to it. So it's incumbent upon us to be agile, because if you're not, well, then you're not going to be able to service your customers' needs or objectives. So that idea of agility, in some sense, to me also, correlates to scalability, but speed being the key. Speed being the key with quality underpinning it all.
So I'm a big SaaS fan, and it's kind of my guilty pleasure to subscribe to God knows how many SaaS tools, and many of them I use, some of them I don't. But localization of SaaS must have been a massive growth area over the past, 10 years, right? Since it started, and an organization like Vistatec would have had to adapt to that. Like, what's your take on any particular challenges there?
Not particularly, because the structures around how localization, works, fit most business models, be it, kind of retail, whatever. The way, the financial structures and the financial approach to it remains the same. The fact that, it's, SaaS versus non-SaaS doesn't necessarily impact how we would go about the business of the projects. Again, there was never a situation, or certainly not one that I can recall, where, agreements with clients would have, stuff like, minimum volumes or whatever. It was, to one extent, or another, a SaaS model. You had an agreement with the client, and like you either did it or you didn't. If you didn't do it, you didn't do the work, you didn't get paid. So it was, to some extent, always, a SaaS environment for us. And I think you're right. I think it is going to. It's the way it's going, and I don't see it going any other direction.
Yeah, we don't have anything else.
We love SaaS.
I don't have I think I have one piece of software. Yeah.
I think you mentioned earlier something about translation being relatively small, but sort of conventional translation being about a third of your revenues. I mean, you've got a number of other business lines as well, and I think one of those is localization staffing. Is that an important part of the business? And what challenges and opportunities are there for LSPs?
I saw that. It is. Okay, I would have to be very upfront about this and say, localization staffing solutions for us, right, for Vistatec, we would see them in the context of a wider client relationship, right? We're not, that wouldn't be our core business, and that's not necessarily one that we want to be in either. But as part of a wider business relationship with the client, we do it all the time. But it isn't what I would consider to be, we wouldn't go and offer it as, a standalone, right? It is part of a wider relationship because, that's I suppose, going back to, Vistatec and what it's about, long business and trusting relationships with the customers are absolutely vital to us. That's how we survive and thrive. We don't grow in terms of an M&A path. That's not our gig. We grow by the quality of our service and the quality of the relationships and the longevity of the relationships we have with our clients. So as part of that, there are, if you like, staffing solutions put in place, but it wouldn't necessarily be, one that we would offer separately.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
No, it makes total sense. I think it's interesting to see it as an add-on, but also as an important part of servicing your customers as well. Yeah,
if you're there trying to service, somebody with a global presence, and they come to you with a problem, like. Going back to the start of the conversation, what is it that we do? We provide global content solutions, right? And part of that could be somebody rings up and says, look, we've got this problem, wherever it may be, what can you do for us? Well, we're there to solve, we're there to help.
Yeah.
So in that sense, yes, it does happen.
It makes complete sense. And I'll just pick up on something you mentioned there, which is not growing by M&A. What's your attitude generally? It seems to be more organically driven growth.
Okay. Yeah, I think we're probably the last independent localization company that hasn't bought somebody. It's just, for an organization to be successful, it has to have certain beliefs and values. And one of the beliefs that we at Vistatec and the founders have, is that we will grow on the basis of, the excellence of our service. We are not an M&A house. That's not our gig. And that's just a choice that we have made, and we're pretty happy with it. I have absolutely nothing bad to say about the competition, about the way they go about their business. They're very successful, but it's just not the approach that we're going to take. We've decided that M&A is for M&A, and we provide global content linguistic solutions, and we're pretty good at it, we think, and pretty happy with that. So again, it's one of our beliefs, if you like.
So in 2020, counter to what I thought, probably at the in the first quarter, second quarter, there was a real M&A boom. And not to go back to the M&A topic, but to 2020. I mean, how has it been for you transitioning through this kind of unprecedented situation with staff, with office, with clients?
Okay, well, let's start with one of the more important ones, or the most important one, staff. Huge concern for us, to try and keep staff safe and well, physically, and let's be frank about it, mentally. Like, that's a huge concern. I would certainly have to say that having to work from home in over the last year hasn't been the highlight of my career. So from that point of view, we have to be very conscious of that. From a business perspective, some clients have done very well, some clients have not done well. But overall, we've more than held our own. We had a very good year, and we're growing, which I suppose is always a good thing. But look, it has definitely been challenging. Moving your entire operation off-site in the space of 2 days. Anyone that says that that's easy, I wouldn't believe him. But it went very successfully for us, and 99% of it is down to the people that work for us. They were fantastic, like totally cooperative, and totally accepting of the situation that we found ourselves in, and we just got on with it. So all credit to the team. Very little to do with me. From the client side, some clients had it very tough. Some businesses saw the taps just turn off, like airlines, travel, and so on. Like we all know who they are. Some of the retail businesses didn't do so well. Those with a strong online presence boomed. Those without an online presence got one very quickly. So we kind of came in there on the back of that. But no, it overall, I have to say we did well. I'm very happy with how the team performed. Very happy.
When it comes to marketing strategies, I mean, Vistatec seems to be quite active generally with blogs, thought leadership, the Think Global Forum. Has COVID changed any of that at all? And what kind of marketing are you involved in at the moment?
Well, okay. Well, the first thing I have to say is I'm from a finance background, so I'm involved in no marketing, right? And that's a strategic decision by my fellow directors, because I really haven't a clue. No, look, we do have a very active marketing department, and they are out there and doing some great stuff for us. My take on marketing is, what we want to do is what we want out there. We want people to understand what we stand for. Right, what it is, what our values are, what we're trying to achieve, and the type of people and the type of organization that we want to be. And to me, all of the marketing that we do, be it the Think Global Forums, the blogs, the VGQs, whatever, that is all about positioning ourselves where we want to be out there and getting people to know and to understand the type of organization that we are and what it is that we're trying to achieve and how we can help them. So we do, Simon and the team, do a huge amount of excellent stuff there, and they are very active on it. But as I say, they keep me well out of it.
There you go. Well, I don't think they keep you out of the strategy planning. So, what's your kind of 2 to 3 outlook for the language industry? And then, what are some of the bigger, exciting initiatives, projects for Vistatec in the next, 12 to 18 months? Okay. So, your side and then the broader picture.
Outlook for the industry, continued growth. I'd be a fool to say otherwise. Every year, we think, Forrester or somebody does a survey and says, it's X billion or whatever, and then the following year, sure, it's blown out of the water. So continued growth would certainly be one for me. I think the content is certainly, video is huge. And it's gonna, that's just going to continue in my mind. So, that's going to be a crucial part of it. In terms of what would I be looking forward to a little bit more closer to home, I think it will be one of the things I am actually looking forward to is seeing the clients that we have worked with over many, many years that took a serious hit in COVID. I'm really looking forward to seeing those guys getting back on their feet. I thought it would just be great. We've worked with guys, for 10, 15 years, and they took a serious hammering. And hopefully, in the next month or two, we will see them get back on their feet. And I am really looking forward to that because, it's been tough for them. A little bit closer to home again for me. I'll be very curious to see what the Office of the Future for Vistatec looks like. I'd be very curious to see how that pans out. I think we've all enjoyed some aspects of, working from home. And, but we wouldn't mind going back to the office too. I don't know how that's going to play out, but we have to be open to all the variants that were out there that perhaps before we thought, God, you can't do that. But we've certainly learned, it's amazing what you can do when you put your mind to it and somebody puts a gun to your head. So, those things, I suppose, will be the things that I'll be watching most closely.
Great, Thomas. It was a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much. And personally, I'm looking forward to, traveling at some point when it's safe again. And maybe we can meet sometime in Dublin.
Thanks, Thomas.
All right. Thanks so much.